Good morning everybody, Nano Reef back at it again with another video. Today we're going to review an old video that I did 9 years ago on leather coral. A lot has changed, I've grown a lot, I've learned a lot, and back then I said some stupid stuff like decent lighting, so just about decent water and decent lighting. What does that even mean? Anybody can take care of them, they are peaceful corals, they won't... Peaceful corals, but they have toxins. Leathers need medium water quality. What does that even mean? So today I want to go over that video, the points in that video, and some of the changes that I would make nowadays. So let's address leather corals and my experience with them first. The leather coral that I have in that video from 9 years ago, I still have in my aquarium today. It's actually in my peninsula tank with my Clarky clowns, and it went from being about the size of a quarter to probably about this big around by now. And leathers grow really slowly usually, but they can grow a lot faster. So the main reason that one didn't grow is for a long time, it was in a 13 gallon. And honestly, when I got the 13 gallon, it was barely bigger than it was 9 years ago. And that was only 3 years ago. So most of the growth that it's had is in the past 3 years. The reason for that is 3 years ago is when I started getting really seriously back into the hobby by getting an aquarium, doing water changes, and then eventually that led back to me making videos again. So that's what brought me here to you today. With that said, I would say that leather corals, I guess we'll talk about growth first then. The growth of leather corals can be anywhere from maybe like ½ an inch a year around the perimeter of the leather coral. So if it's this big, you know, it might be like slightly bigger, to maybe you could maybe get about like an inch out of it on like a good year type of thing. So the bigger your leather coral gets, the more growth you can get. Now if you're trying to frag leather corals and grow them for the purposes of trade-ins or selling them, what I would honestly suggest is getting 3 or 4 larger colonies, growing them, and then maybe once a year trimming them. And out of each trim, so what you do to frag a leather coral is leather corals have this like platform shape. So their top of the leather coral is like very wide. And you will take scissors and cut around the top of the leather coral, like you'll cut around the perimeter and maybe take off like about an inch. So assuming your leather coral is like, you know, pretty good size, you would take about an inch off the perimeter and then cut that into like 1-inch cubes and then glue that to a tile or a frag plug, something like that. And then all of those would eventually turn into healthy little frags, and they would be like what I bought. Now I bought mine back then for $29.99. So they've definitely changed quite a bit. They've gotten more expensive now. I've seen most green toadstools go from anywhere between like 40 to 50 bucks nowadays. But some of the other leathers, like devil's hand, have really gone up. The cheapest I've seen a devil's hand leather is about $80 to $100. And I've seen them upwards of like $140 to $150 in some more expensive stores that I visited. Unfortunately, I think that some leathers, just due to where they come from, due to exports, shipping increases, everything after COVID, it's gotten significantly more expensive. There's also things like harvesting laws and rules like that, right? Where we are getting less and less corals because sustainable harvesting is being maintained and things like that. But that's a whole nother topic. I don't really want to get into that discussion. But with that being said, leather corals, the pricing's definitely gone up. Growth, about ½ an inch to an inch a year if you're doing this really well. And if you're going to frag them, it's ideal to have several leathers that you can grow and then trim and then get probably 12 to 15 frags out of each one, assuming they're that nice big size. Now the other thing I didn't address in that video is there are different types of leathers. So there's toadstool, there's devil's hand, there's sinulara or sinularia, however you say it, which is like the finger leathers. And I have a couple of them in this tank. Here I have the green sinularia leather. I have colt coral in here as well, which is a type of leather coral. In my peninsula, I've got the green toadstool. I've also got the green toadstool in my BioCube that's out there. So I've got quite a few different types of leathers, and the only one I haven't successfully kept is devil's hand, which I've only tried once, and unfortunately it just kind of melted away, and that was kind of what had me exit the hobby the last time. Let's talk about water quality and water flow. So the water flow is one thing I got right in my last video. I said they need medium to high water flow. And this is going to depend on the leathers. So if you have a toadstool, you can probably get away with medium. But if you have those finger leathers where they're like a really dense cluster, you want high water flow. And in the last video, the biggest problem is I didn't give reasons why. Like, why do you need this, right? Like, yeah, I can say it needs medium and high water flow, but there needs to be a reason. So the biggest reason for finger leathers is that detritus builds up inside the coral structure. So when you get a finger leather and you get this big dense colony, I remember my father used to have like a softball sized colony of just crazy finger leather. and it would get this like detritus inside the leather, and then it would start to decay, and you'd have to go and blow it out with a turkey baster if there wasn't enough water flow, and then it would start to heal up, and then the process would repeat if you didn't have that water flow. So we ended up having to get a Corellia power head that was back in a 29-gallon BioCube back in the day. But I would suggest higher water flow if you have a leather that has fingers on it. That way all the detritus can get blown out of the leather coral. And if you have that toadstool, they're very flat. They're like a platform, right? They're like a curvy platform. So those could get away with medium flow. And leathers do shed, especially toadstools. Toadstools will shed their entire layer of skin every month or two, and then that will clean off the coral, and they'll need that medium water flow to high water flow to get that shedding off of them. Okay, finally, I've made you guys wait long enough. Let's talk about water parameters. So keeping water parameters, I like to always recommend that you try and keep close to what the ocean has. But what does that really mean? That means DKH anywhere from like 8 to 12. I personally like to keep mine around like 8.5 to 8.8, somewhere in there. That gives me enough of a buffer that I can go down to like 8.1 and stay above 8, but enough of a buffer that if I go too high, I'm like in the 9s, where if you keep it at around like 12, like you're riding that higher line, right? So I like to keep around like 8.5 to 8.8. Now how I do that is I dose all for Reef, which also doses trace elements, keeps your alk, calcium, magnesium, all that stuff in check. So if you're dosing outside of all for Reef, if you're dosing like 2 parts and things like that, you definitely need to make sure, you know, your calcium is probably in like the 440, the 460 range, I would say. Magnesium, like 1350, 1380, somewhere in there maybe. I would say, yeah, alkalinity, 8.8 is what I like to stay around. And then all the trace elements and stuff, just kind of what your salt mixes at, and try and emulate that. Now the salt I'm using, if you care, is Red Sea's Blue Bucket, which is their non-coral pro salt. That's just their regular salt. So that is why I dose, because that mixes at an 8 DKH. And with that, DKH is alkalinity if you're not familiar. But with that being an 8, I do have to dose to keep it just above that 8, because as soon as you do that water change, you kind of bring yourself back to 8, and the coral start to consume that alkalinity, it starts to drop below 8. So that's why I dose my Reef tanks. So with that said, and to be fair, I also do weekly water changes of like small amounts now. I used to do like large weekly water changes, which is a bad idea, but I do just like an inch of the water in the tank probably once a week, maybe every 2 weeks if I like, every now and then you miss a week. So it kind of ends up being more like 3 water changes a month for each tank. So there ends up being like 1 little week that I miss something here or there. Now, outside of those parameters, there's some other things you need to consider, like phosphates. So I try to keep my phosphates sort of low in some tanks and sort of high in other tanks. And I'm kind of like playing around with this. So right now, this tank has 0.02, I almost said 0.2, 0.02 phosphates is what's in this lagoon tank. And everything's doing great. My Sinulair leather, they're super happy. I mean, they were kind of PO'd a couple weeks ago in my previous tank. And even the colt coral is like starting to come back just a tiny bit, but I don't know, colt corals just like don't like my tanks. I think it's because my lights are a little too strong for colt coral, so they kind of like melt away. But anyways, now in my Peninsula, that tank is running at like 0.09, like much closer to that higher ceiling. So your phosphates, you want anywhere from like 0.03 to 0.1 on like the highest end. So having like 0.09 is like very close to that higher end. Now 0.09 is what my phosphates just kind of sit at with how I feed, how often I do water changes, all of that kind of stuff. Like if I continually test that tank, it'll be right around 0.08, 0.09. And it'll just stay there unless I put something like Roaphos in it. Roaphos is actually what I'm using in this tank. So this is Roaphos. This is just an endorsement from me because this is what I've been using. It's been working great. This actually comes with a media bag, and you pour some of this into the bag, not all of it. You only pour, so this is 100 grams, and this is a 25-gallon tank. I maybe used half of this. Now, I've only had this in there for like 3 weeks, so like having it in there for the last 2 to 3 weeks means that I don't know exactly when this is gonna expire. So don't take this as like a strong recommendation yet, because I haven't successfully tested this long-term yet. I don't know, for all I know, like I could have to change my Roaphos next week, right? Because what if my phosphates goes back to 0.09? I don't know though if this 12.5 grams of Roaphos is gonna be able to keep my phosphates down for like months or weeks. We'll see. So we'll see how it does. But yeah, this is what I'm using for now. And so far, I mean, looks great. Okay, something else that needs to be addressed with leather corals is the toxins they release. Leather corals are notorious for releasing these toxins that won't show up in test kits. They're not going to show up on your ICP test most likely, and they're gonna wreck your tank if you have a whole bunch of leathers. Now you can avoid that by running something like carbon, doing frequent water changes, or both. So how I work around that is by using ChemiPure Blue. Now ChemiPure Blue does fight phosphates a little bit, however it's not nearly as effective as Royal Phos. So I do have a bag of ChemiPure Blue in my Marineland Peninsula 25 gallon, and my phosphates are still at around 0.08 in there, and normally they like are just a hair above that, like 0.09, right? So that ChemiPure Blue, in my opinion, isn't really removing a ton of phosphates. Where the Royal Phos, you put it in, you test like 48 hours later, and your phosphates have dropped significantly. So Royal Phos is like crazy about lowering phosphates compared to my experience with ChemiPure Blue. But ChemiPure Blue has carbon in it, which is going to help remove the toxins. It'll absorb the toxins, and as soon as you put that in there, your leather corals are going to start growing like crazy, because what's going to happen is in your tank, those toxins are produced. Now in the ocean, leather produces toxins. The ocean is constantly washing away these toxins into the abyss of the ocean, and the coral constantly keeps producing more. So what's the coral doing in your tank? It's constantly producing toxins, most likely, but they're not going anywhere. They're trapped in that closed system. So unless you're doing water changes or having it absorbed by carbon, those toxins are going to accumulate in your tank and prevent other corals from growing. So at least in my experience, how the toxins have worked is that all the corals have become stagnant. They have stopped growing. They haven't necessarily died. I don't think the toxins are enough to necessarily kill everything in my tank, but they just stopped it from growing. Like take this 25 gallon, for example, this trumpet coral. I had this trumpet coral, which is known as candy cane coral as well. It's the green and purple variety. Had that in a 13 gallon with my leather corals, and it was just 2 heads for the longest time. And then as soon as I started separating my tanks out, the big leather coral went in the anemone tank. The smaller leathers did stay in here, but they're much smaller than my big giant leather. So basically, as soon as that big giant leather got separated, this thing is now like 6 heads. It's like, it's ridiculous. So it's growing like crazy. So if you look at something like my hammer coral, it's growing consistently. It's doubled heads in the past month, so that's really good to see. I'm really proud of that. Other than that, oh, my Duncan coral. So my Duncan coral, when I got it, was a single head. It grew, I would say it grew like maybe a head every 2 to 3 months, and then as soon as I separated out the leather coral, that thing started popping off. It's gotten, I mean, now it's probably like 12 heads. It's like a baseball. It's like this little softball looking baseball of tentacles, which is pretty funny. So I really love my Duncan coral, honestly. They're super underrated, guys. If you need an easy beginner coral, just go get a Duncan coral, start growing it. It's funny, you come watch a video about leather corals and then you're probably gonna go end up with other corals. But yeah, so you definitely need to take out those toxins with some kind of carbon, some kind of water change, or both, hopefully both, right? Do like a little weekly, like inch of water out of your tank, or half an inch if you got a much smaller tank, like a 10 gallon or smaller. And then other than that, oh, something I mentioned was lighting. I mentioned in the previous video you need like medium to high light. I think I misunderstood lighting at the time. So there's a lot of misconceptions with lighting. There's LED lights, which are very intense. There's the height of the light. There's the depth of the water. There's the spread of the light. All these things that back in that previous video I didn't really consider. So I was back in that video, I was kind of just thinking more like, I have X light fixture, which is gonna produce low, medium, or high light. And that's not really effective. You could have the same Kessel I have here on a 400 gallon, and that would be low lighting. But you can have it on a 25 gallon, and it's extremely high lighting. That thing is running at a maximum of 20% right now, because I need to make a video about this, but at 30%, it was not going good. So anyways, you also have to acclimate corals to your lighting, so keep that in mind. If you're getting a new light, you need to slowly acclimate the corals to the new light. But with lighting in mind, I would say, in general, leather corals are a low light coral. Now, what I mean by that is they can adapt to high light. They can definitely get in a high light aquarium and do great. You've probably seen leather corals in tanks where they've got like 3 or 4 Kessels on it, and it's maybe like a 100-gallon tank, and the leathers are just getting blasted and they're doing great. It's because they've acclimated to that environment. It's not like they went from having like a single Reef Bright strip to, you know, 4 Kessels on top of it overnight. Now, with leathers in general, you can easily kill them with too much light. Easily. You can also kill them with not enough light, but you're going to kill them much slower with not enough light than with too much light, in my opinion. If you have too much light, like the devil's hand leather, when I tried it, I think I just had too much light. And same with this colt coral, it's just too much light, and it just kind of like melts and disappears. Now, the colt coral will come back periodically and then just kind of start melting again. But in the past, I've had colt coral like take over the tank because I had a really low light. So, in my opinion, I would start with low light, especially if you can get a light like a Kessel or anything that's LED that's controllable. You can start with low light, slowly start increasing. I'm talking like maybe increase like 10% over the course of a month. So maybe if you have a new LED light, you start at like 15, 20%, and you slowly increase to 30. And then you do it again, slowly increase to 40. And eventually there's gonna be a ceiling. So keep that in mind. Your corals are going to have a ceiling. Like if you get a 300-watt light, there's no way you're going to be able to use 300 watts on a nano tank. You know, that's meant for like a frag tank that the light's, you know, a foot or two above the tank and it's dispersing around, you know, 30 inches of light. Like that's when those really high powerful lights like the radions and stuff that are, you know, upwards of like 200 watts are going to have success. So for some reason I talked about feeding leathers in that previous video. Leathers are 100% photosynthetic in my opinion. I'm sure that someone out there is feeding leathers like phytoplankton or something, and that might work. Like singulara leathers do have like little polypy things on them that kind of might be able to grab something out of the water column. In my experience though, leather corals, you just don't need to feed them. You just give them good light, good water flow, which all factors into placement in your reef tank, and then they will take off as long as there's no like toxins and the water quality is consistent. That's a huge thing too. Consistency. You need a lot of consistency in your tank. I don't care if your parameters are perfect 3 times a month for 2 days, and then the rest of the months are, you know, absolute trash. I want your water parameters to be consistent day to day to day. So if you do a water change on a Monday, and then you test your alkalinity a week later, and it's, you know, 6.8 when it was 8.1, it's like, well, okay, every day you're losing like 0.2 of alk. Like you need to be dosing that to remain at the 8.1. Otherwise, your tank is going to be going through this roller coaster, which is going to stagnate, which is going to stagnate all your coral growth, which is a huge problem. The only other thing I want to add to that is I did talk about warning signs in that previous video. So detritus buildup is a warning sign. If your leather coral has like decaying skin or flesh and there's like little black bubbles on it, then that means there's not enough water flow on it. If your leather coral is all closed up for a significant period of time and it's not shedding, that's a huge problem. It should be shedding if it's closed up for a couple days. Like my toadstool leather right now has been closed up for like the past 6 or 7 days, and he's just like PO'd. And I think it's because he's got 2 things going on. He's been moved twice in the past month, so he is like, not between tanks by the way, moved like the whole rockscape has moved, so he's like had to adjust a different placement in the tank twice. I've also did a significant water change on that tank when I moved it last, which was like 2 weeks ago, and we also got a new light like a month ago, so he's still adjusting to the new light, I think, and the new light is like slowly ramping up to 30% intensity, so he's got a lot going on. He's not very happy, but I'm sure he'll make it through this. Like I've had that thing 12 years now? Oh god. 12 years now I've had that coral. Anyways, that's my leather care video, guys. That's my update on my previous video from 9 years ago. Some of the changes I would recommend. I got 45,000 views on that video, so I just wanted to do an updated leather coral care video for you guys today with some more of my experience and expertise tucked away in there. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that I missed. I can't put everything into a video right now, or at least right now I can't. Right now I'm like running gunning. I'm trying to make a video every 3 days just to not only feed the algorithm, but grow the channel. So not every video is going to be the most polished thing in the world, but hopefully it's good enough quality. And if you guys could leave a like and subscribe on this, I would greatly appreciate it. If you can pin the channel and do like the little bell, sorry, not pin the channel. You can do like the little bell to notify you, like that fuels the algorithm like crazy, and I would super appreciate that. So I can't tell you guys how thankful enough I am that you are watching my videos. I really appreciate that. Like this is my #1 hobby and passion. Like if I could have like my dream job, it would be to make videos on coral for you guys and to be like basically a marine biologist. Like that's what I originally wanted to go to school for before I changed my mind and changed my whole career and everything. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch y'all on the next one.